Hi, everyone. This is Patrick Charlton from the Texas Deer Association. We're going to get started here in about 5 minutes. I want to try to start promptly at 10 o'clock. We have more than 100 people registered, so I know that we will have quite a few questions at the end of this. If you are listening on the phone, you may or may not be able to submit questions. However, if you have access to internet or you are able to connect through a mobile device or a laptop, you'll be able to submit questions that we will answer during the live broadcast. So please feel free to um, please feel free to submit any questions you may have. We'll be reviewing the questions as we go through the rules. All right. Thank you very much. We'll get started promptly at 10 o'clock. All right, folks. Thank y'all for tuning in. We have quite a few people on. I'm very excited that we have so many attendees. I'm really happy that y'all have the opportunity to join us today. I know it's Monday morning, and I know the week gets kicked off pretty quickly. But again, my name is Patrick Tarleton. I'm the executive director of the Texas Deer Association. Our executive committee and board thought it would be important for us to host a webinar on the rules, because so many of you have been asking questions about kind of as the year ends, how you calculate things like 3.6%, what regulations there are on live testing, and many other questions as well. So I want to dive right in and tell you that we're going to cover a lot of material today. Please, again, feel free to ask any questions you might have. If you are online, you can submit questions via our portal. If you have a question, you're on the phone and you want to text one of our staff members, or you want to call the office to ask a question, please feel free to, okay? We want to get as many questions answered as we can, so that way, as you're filling out your year-end report, you're able to go ahead and ensure that you have all the access to information in case you can't get a hold of deer breeder permit staff at Texas Parks and Wildlife. I do want to tell you that everything that's said today is my interpretation of the rules. It's what I can read on the paper. The final judgment always ends at Texas Parks and Wildlife. I would ask that you reach out now to your permit staff. Those folks over there work very hard to ensure we get our questions answered. I know that they're working with many of you to get your year-end inventories and live testing completed. So please feel free to reach out over there and ask them as many questions as needed. The final judgment on any conflict always resides with Texas Parks and Wildlife. So I want to be sure that you understand this webinar is for informational purposes only. So with that, all of you should be able to see a screen. If you're on the phone, we're going to try to talk through it. The first thing that we have here is just an intro. As you know, these rules were adopted in 2016, in the summer of 2016. They were implemented last year, and we've kind of been living under them ever since. The first thing to note is that online on the Texas Deer Association, you can find out exactly how a facility becomes transfer category 1, transfer category 2, or transfer category 3 in your pens, okay? There's 3 ways to become transfer category 1. The first is you can be certified or 5th year status under the Texas Animal Health Commission herd certification program, all right? The second way is you've tested an average of 80% of your eligible mortalities within the pens of your age-eligible animals over the past 5 reporting years, with a minimum number of tests of 3.6% of the sum of the eligible deer in your pens over the last 5 years, okay? The final way is you could have walked in and tested 50% of your animals, age-eligible animals, 16 months and older, live tested them via a rectal, tonsil, or lymph node biopsy, and having sufficient samples for 50% of your herd would have also qualified you, okay? There's one side note, and that is if you did the 25% testing to get you through the first release season that just concluded March 1, then you have to submit your live testing results for the other 25% by May 15th. So if you tested 25% to get you through the first release period here, the last hunting season, you owe those tests to Texas Parks and Wildlife, the results of those tests to Texas Parks and Wildlife by May 15th of 2017, okay? With the lag time in the labs, my advice is if you have not already live tested to get your other 25%, you need to be doing that this coming week, if not tomorrow. The lab time and the amount of time to get those submitted, it is running a little bit behind, and so we want to make sure that if you're still waiting to calculate your additional 25%, my hope is that you've already mailed those samples off to the lab. All right. Transfer category 2. Facilities that did not qualify for one of those 3 options, 5th year or herd certification status in the Animal Health Commission, 80% over the last 5 years of post-mortem testing, or the 50% live test. If you don't meet one of those, then you are in transfer category 2 right now. In order to jump up to that, to transfer category 1, if you're trying to get from TC2 to TC1, the only option available to you now is the 50% whole herd age eligible animal live test. Okay. You also can get it at the end of this reporting year if, for the previous 4 reporting years plus the one we are currently in that is about to end, if your testing now adds up to 80%, averages to 80% of your eligible mortalities, and you've met the 3.6% rule, you will then qualify. So for those of you that are TC2, if you're looking for ways to be TC1, you have 2 options. The first is you can walk into your pens and live test 50% or more of your age eligible animals in your facility. The second option is you pull your numbers of all your age eligible inventories at the end of each reporting year for the past 4 years. Wait until April 1 and do the same calculation with this reporting year, and that would give you 5 years. If by chance at the end of March 31 of this reporting year, your look back for 5 years now adds to up to 80% of your eligible deaths in your pens with the 3.6% minimum, then you would then qualify for to be TC1 status. Okay, so from now on, you have those 2 paths to make it to TC1 with no release site testing upon sale or release. So the TC3 means that you are somehow connected to a non-movement qualified CWD suspect herd. That could be trace in or trace out facilities. So if you are in a transfer category 3, you are more than likely connected to a positive facility or in a trace out or trace in scenario, meaning that you will have to test 100% of your eligible mortalities in the pens, and any deer released would have to have 100% hunter harvest on any class 3 release site. Plus, you'll also have to release them with an RFID or news tag. Okay. So that gets us through the basics. That gets us through how do I become a TC1? How do I become a TC2? And then why might I be a TC3? Okay. So I have a question coming in. It says, what date do you become TC1 after your 5-year qualifications? You would become that when your inventory is submitted to Texas Parks and Wildlife. Once they've had the opportunity to review your inventories plus your minimum 3.6% testing, you would then be upgraded from TC2 to TC1. Okay, so it's not going to happen immediately on March 31st, because on March 31 you may have a death at 11:59 p.m. at night. So we have to get all the way to 12:01 a.m. on April 1st. That then begins the new reporting year going forward. You evaluate your eligible deaths versus your inventory. If it's been 80% looking back for 5 years, then you would be able to be a TC1 status. Okay, and we're going to get into the end of the reporting year, some of that as well. I want to tell you again. Let's go through. If you're watching online, I want to walk through release sites. Most of you are pretty familiar with the release sites and how that works. But a Class 1 release site has no release site testing, meaning you have not released since the rules came out and have been adopted. You have not released any TC2 deer on your release site. So you're a Class 1 release site and you have no release site testing. If you are a Class 2 release site, that means you've released TC2 deer on your release site, and it does carry mandatory harvest testing. Okay, that's not to say you have to go out and shoot deer. What it says is the first 15 deer harvested per season through the end of the 2018-2019 hunting season must be tested on your release site. So if you shoot 1, you test 1. If you shoot 7, you test 7. If you shoot 15, you test 15. If you shoot 30, You only test your first 15. Okay. So, then class 3 release sites, we already talked about. You would be connected to a facility, a trace in or trace out facility. So, and those carry RFID testing as well. So that gets you through how you become a TC1, TC2. Most of you have been living with these dynamics for more than 8 months now. So let's kind of get started and into some general reporting year questions. Some of the questions that we field most notably are, how do I calculate 3.6%? Okay, that is the question we probably get asked the most. To calculate 3.6%, you take the inventory on March 31 of age eligible animals. So if you're enrolled in the Parks and Wildlife System, you are 16 months and older. If you are enrolled in the Animal Health Commission USDA herd certification program, it's any deer that is 12 months and older standing in your pens. Okay, so any deer 12 months and older if you're in the Animal Health Commission program, or 16 months older if you're in the Parks and Wildlife System. That's your base number. That's your age eligible inventory. You then look back in TWIMS and add up all of your eligible deaths, and you would then have your number to multiply times 0.036 or 3.6%. Okay, so let's make it kind of easy for everybody. If we have 100, if I'm enrolled in the Parks and Wildlife System and I have 100 deer standing in my pens on March 31st at 11:59 p.m., then I take that number, and I've had 10 deaths. So I add 10 to that number over the past year from April 1 of 2016 to March 31 of 2017. I've had 10 deaths. That makes 110 eligible animals. I multiply that number times 0.036 and I get 3.96. That number rounds up to 4, so I must have tested or have accounted for 4 post-mortem tests, 4 dead tests throughout the past year. If I have, then I've met my requirements. Okay, I can move on. I'm movement qualified from this point forward. And y'all, I want to make it very clear. This applies to every deer breeder who has a permit in the state of Texas. These are the new movement qualification standards. So the new movement qualification standards require everyone to have tested 80% of their eligible mortalities in the pens throughout the duration of their reporting year. So let's say, for instance, that in that same scenario, I have 100 age eligible animals. I had 10 deaths. My number is 3.96. I know that I have to have tested 4 deer. If I've tested 4, I'm immediately movement qualified. If I've only tested 2, then I have to make up 2 deer. I can do that by live testing, and I live test at a 3-to-1 ratio, and I have and so that means I would have to walk in and live test 6 animals to be compliant with the movement qualification standards. Okay, I hope everybody understands that. That is the basis for the 3.6% and the movement qualification. Okay, I get asked this question often as well, and that is, how long do I have to test? How long do I have to live test if I haven't met my 80%? The answer to that is however long you want to be non-movement qualified. You will be non-movement qualified if you do not meet that standard. So in order for you to be movement qualified, you have to have submitted tests that aggregate themselves to the 80% formula. Okay, so my advice is, if you run your inventory today and you know that you're short, you probably should start scheduling a live test very, very soon. Get your veterinarian out there to pull rectal or tonsil samples, and that way you'll have those ready to go. A live test is good for 6 months. Okay, so if you had, in the same scenario, if I have 100 age eligible animals and I've had 10 deaths, and that means I owe 4 post-mortem tests, but I've only given Texas Parks and Wildlife one sample, I know that I'm going to owe 3. You might want to go and schedule a sample collection, live sample collection for at least 9 to 10 animals. I always say, if you have to give 9, you probably should take 11, just so that in case there's an insufficient follicle count or something at the lab, then you won't have to go back out and go through the same process. You will have submitted 1 or 2 or 3 more than you were supposed to. Okay, so even if you pull only 4 or 5 samples, I would go ahead and pull a few more, just in case, to be certain that once you submit those to the lab, that even if there is an insufficient sampling, you're not having to start all over by the time they've gotten you your results. Okay, so those are the types of things regarding the 3.6 and live testing we often get asked. We also get asked in the 25% and 25% model, there is a deadline. That deadline is May 15th, and you must have submitted your results to Texas Parks and Wildlife, and your facility must be upgraded by May 15th. So in that scenario, you've got quite a rush on it. So I would tell you to get started pretty quickly if you haven't already done that. But for those of you that are trying to figure out whether you're going to be movement qualified or not, the answer is very simple. If you'll go into TWIMS and pull your eligible animal inventory, you will be able to see immediately whether or not you are qualified based on your number of deaths that you've sampled this year. Okay, so well, we have another question coming in. It says, in the scenario, would you comply with 3.6? So, I don't quite understand the question. There is a minimum that you have to have tested to be movement qualified, and that is 3.6%. So the requirement of 80% of your deaths is just the number of deaths that you were supposed to have sampled. Okay, the floor for the amount of testing would be the 3.6%. Don't rely on the fact that you've caught 80% and you're okay. If you have not reached the floor is that 3.6% minimum. You are not going to be movement qualified. Okay, so that's kind of a good point. Let's say in the scenario I gave earlier, where there was 110 deer eligible to count for your testing, right? And you only had 2 deer die, okay? And you tested each one of them, and so you're 100% testing. Because you owe 4 tests, you will not be movement qualified. You still must test the three up to the 3.6% minimum in your herd, okay? And that's 3.6% of your age eligible animals in your herd inventory on March 31 of this coming year. March 31, that's happening in about 4 days. All right. Okay, I have another question here, and it says, if I am a TC2 release site and bought 11 deer and released them, am I allowed to build a breeder pen in the same location and trap a released deer on our property and put in the breeder pen? To be clear, if you're going to trap released deer, you have to have a DMP permit, okay? And your facility is going to be a TC2, and so you will qualify under the DMP TC2 provisions, okay? But you cannot go out and trap deer and put them in breeding facilities. What you can do is you can trap deer and put them in a DMP facility, a deer management permit program, and that way you would apply for a DMP permit. Okay. Please don't get confused that those are 2 different permits. I know that was kind of an interesting question about catching deer out of a release site. You are allowed to detain deer out of a release site, but that is a different permit called a DMP permit, not a breeder permit. Okay. Let's get back over here, because I want to make clear we've got some questions on the Animal Health Commission program. So let me get you down here to the frequently asked questions. We'll share all these handouts with everyone as well. You should, if you're seeing them online right now or you're on the phone, we're certainly able to share these handouts with you. We've got a summary of the rules. We've got And then we've got 2 Parks and Wildlife handouts. One is a full portion of a full copy of the rules as well. So we'll get those out to folks. But listen, if one of the questions was, if I'm enrolled in the Texas Animal Health Commission program, but I am not 5th year certified, does the 80% and 3.6% qualify to me? And the answer is yes. Once you are a 5th year or certified status at the Texas Animal Health Commission, the 3.6% base does not apply to you. The 80% will always apply to you because you have to have more than 80%. You have to have 100% to be in the program. But the 3.6% base does not apply to you if you are 5th year certified. If you are 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th year, it absolutely does apply to you, and you are required to meet the 3.6% minimum at your facility. Okay. I want to make something clear because there's some questions coming in that deal with 80% and 3.6%. The 80% number we discussed talks about eligible deaths, eligible mortalities throughout the year. The 3.6% minimum that you're required to test deals with the live age-eligible animals standing in your pens on March 31st of 2017, okay? So 80% deals with the number of deaths that you were supposed to have sampled throughout the year. The 3.6% minimum is based on the live animals, the live eligible aged deer standing in your pens on March 31, 2017. All right. Let me get through here. We're going to work on some questions again. If you have to have 80% of the postmortem tests and you've tested 8 out of 10, but 3.6 is only 4 tests. So those are 2 different qualifications that we talked about. If you always have to test 80% of your age eligible animals, okay? That's a movement qualification standard. You also have to have tested enough deer to account for a 3.6% minimum. So this is where some people get caught up. If I had 100 animals in my pens and I had 10 deaths, okay, the first number I have to make sure that I have tested is 80% of those deer that died. So let's say in a scenario that I had 4 deer die, okay, I would have, and I tested all 4 of them. I accounted for more than 80%, 100%, okay? I would not have to satisfy any other requirements because I've met both the 80% of deaths and the 3.6% minimum number. So if I miss one of those numbers, I have to walk in and live test up to that. So if I was short on my 80% of eligible deaths, then I have to live test up to that. If I was short on the 3.6% minimum, after I've looked at my inventory on March 31, I also have to live test up to that. You live test up to your greatest inequality. You live test up to the point where you're missing the most, okay? So if it takes me 3 deer to achieve the 3.6, but I only owe 2 deer to achieve the 80%, I still have to live test the 3 deer to account for the 3 deer in the 3.6% minimum, okay? I know that got into the weeds a little bit, but I want to be sure that those are 2 different standards that you have to comply with. And if you fail to comply with either portion of them, you are required to live test at a 3-to-1 ratio to get there, okay? There is a scenario where if you are looking at to become TC1, if you are looking at becoming TC1 over the past 5 years. So if this inventory, you had enough tests that you think you might qualify for the TC1 look back of 5 years, and you haven't met the 3.6% minimum, you can live test to the 3.6% minimum, but you cannot live test to the 80% over 5-year minimum. Okay, you have to have gotten those samples. You got a question, who do I contact and how do I initiate the process of joining the Texas Animal Health Commission program? It's a great question. The incentive to be in the Texas Animal Health Commission program is that the 3.6 minimum floor no longer applies to you once you've been in the program for 5 years. So that is a huge incentive for you to get there, but it does require 100% of eligible mortality testing over each year for 5 years. You would reach out to your regional veterinarian at the Animal Health Commission, and you can easily Google the Texas Animal Health Commission, and you go to their veterinary portion, and it will take you, or you can go to the contact portion, and it will take you to your region of the Animal Health Commission. Simply call your regional veterinarian, and you can start the process. Okay. My advice is, if you are not enrolled in that program, that is a very worthwhile program to be involved in. If I was you, I would look at doing that very promptly. All right. Um, um, there is a comment here that says that the deer that are eligible in your inventories are 12 months and older. The deer that are age eligible in your pens is differentiated between what program you are enrolled in. If you are enrolled in the Animal Health Commission program, it is 12 months and older. Okay. If you are not enrolled in the Animal Health Commission program, your eligible aged animals is 16 months and older. All right. Um, got another question here. So that was a good question. It was using my example. It said, if I in the example I said, if I had 10 deer die. Okay. If you had 10 deer die, you have to account for 8 of those tests. Okay. So if you have 5 deer die in um, your facility during a year, you owe 4 tests. All right. If you have 10 deer die, you owe 8 tests. And this is to be movement qualified for the 80% of mortality testing. Okay. That has not changed, folks. From the time that we were at 20% to where you had to account for 20% of your eligible mortalities, now that number for every breeder in the state of Texas has moved up to 80%. Okay. Whether you're TC1 or TC2, it does not matter. Everybody who has a breeder permit has to abide by the 80% eligible mortality testing rule. All right. Um, one of the questions is, I've antemortem tested 25% of the required 50% last year to achieve TC1. Um, I have now looked at postmortem testing to qualify for the rest. You Again, I want to be clear with you. The rules are very clear, and I'm going to try to get to them here. If you're following along on the screen, if you'll look at period 1, subdivision 3, and then that subsection C says, note, by antemortem testing a minimum of 25%, a facility may temporarily attain TC1 status prior to May 15th, 2017. In order to maintain TC status after May 15th of 2017, the facility must supply the remainder of the live samples to reach the 50% level by no later than May 15th, 2017. So you are required to submit those samples by May 15th, or you will have to go in and qualify for live testing again with the 50% matrix. Okay. So if that is you and you're in that scenario, please submit those tests as soon as possible. You only have until May 15th. All right. Um, this is a really good question too. We started our breeder facility in November of 2016. Deer were transferred to our facility. Let's say that is the case, and I'm gonna work through this with you. November to December, December to January, January to February, February to March. That's 4 months. Okay. The 80% and 3.6% minimum only applies to you if you have been in business for more than 6 months. Okay? So if you just bought deer in November of 16 and haven't had any deer die, you have not been in business 6 months. You are okay through this reporting year. But next year, all of these provisions apply to you again. You also, if that's you, dependent upon the class that you bought, the transfer category that you bought those deer from, that is the transfer category you have assumed. Okay, so it's the lowest transfer category is the one you assumed. So if you are just getting into the business, thank you for getting in. It's an exciting time to get in, but at the same time, these rules will become applicable to you starting April 1 of 2017 in the new report year going forward. Okay, our reporting years run from April 1 to March 31st. So we're right at the tail end of the 2016-2017 reporting year, and we're jumping over into the 2017-2018 reporting year now. All right. So it says, I have tested 80% this year and upgraded to TC1. Do I have to do that again this year? So that's where the lingo gets a little tricky. Did you live test 80% of your animals, or did you just test 80% of your eligible deaths? If you walked in and live tested, you are TC1, okay? But you still, from this point forward, owe the 80% minimum requirement of mortality, coupled with the 3.6% minimum number of samples via your herd inventory, okay? But if you've live tested, you no longer have to live test year after year. You live test to up to 50% or more of your age-eligible animals, secured TC1 status, and now you just owe the minimum movement qualifications of 80% and 3.6% of your inventory. Okay. And so we just had someone who kind of asked a similar question on the age eligible deer. If you started in January of 2017 and you bought TC1 deer and you've had no deaths, you don't owe any tests because you haven't been in business for more than 6 months. Okay. All right. Let's if we're kind of, I think we've run out of questions in the 3.6 and 80% movement qualification discussion. I want to move over to DMP and Triple T because I do know that we always get questions on those two as well. We always seem to get questions on DMP and Triple T. So some rules of note: if a DMP breeding pen receives deer from a TC2 facility or a TC2 or a Class 2 release site, that DMP release site must submit the first 15 hunter harvested animals for CWD testing, okay, through the 2018-2019 season. So if you are a Class 2 release site and you are operating a DMP pen and you bring deer in from a Class 2 release site, you are going to have to release site test up to your first 15 animals. Okay. If you bring a buck from a lower status herd in a DMP facility and that buck is returned to the lower status breeding facility will be downgraded. So if you take a buck from a breeding facility and you move it into a Class 2 release site and you are a Class 1, then you will have, and you return that buck back, you're gonna downgrade your facility. So make sure that whomever you're trading with in the DMP buck program, that you are looking at what release site class they have, as well as if they have breeder pens on the facility, as well as their breeder pens. Okay. I have another question regarding the rules coming in. Um, yeah, this is going to be a tough one. So, what if I have sold or released all of my age eligible animals and only have deer remaining on March 31 that are not eligible? The answer is you would have no required testing for the 3.6% minimum. However, if you had a deer die during your reporting year, you would have to have tested it to achieve the 80% eligible mortality standard. So we get that question a lot. Remember, the 3.6% minimum is the amount of age eligible deer standing in your pens on March 31st in 4 days. Okay? So if you have released a lot of bred does and you only have yearlings or even less than that standing in your pens, then you have no age eligible inventory to comply with the 3.6% rule. However, if you had any deaths from April 1 of 2016 to March 31 of 2017, you are going to be required to meet that 80% standard. And so if you had, again, 10 deer die, you would owe 8 tests. So let me tell you where this gets tricky. Let's say you had, in that scenario, let's say you had 10 deer die and you only tested 7 of them. You would have no deer to qualify you for live testing to move you back into movement qualification. On March 31, you would have to wait or you'd have to bring deer in to live test because you would, in that scenario, you would have no deer to reach your 80% eligible standard via live testing. You wouldn't have any age eligible deer standing in your pens to live test. So be real careful with that, okay? If you think you're going to miss and you're selling bred does right now, you might want to make sure you save a couple if you are not meeting one of those standards. And again, you can find out what those standards are by very easily pulling your TWIMS report. Okay, that Parks and Wildlife has made it pretty simple to look on your TWIMS account and find the age eligible animals. All right. Again, and in these types of weird scenarios, I would ask that you call the Texas Parks and Wildlife Deer Breeder Permit staff as well. Okay. We got a few. So here's another question along that. If you release all your deer prior and you have no more deer, your facility is a TC2. Does your facility stay a TC2? Or how can I get TC1 status? So the answer is, if you remember, the Texas Deer Association fought really hard, and other members of the association fought really hard to get the residency requirement moved during this rulemaking and also get you the ability to live test up to a TC1 at any time. Okay. So any time before these rules expire in 2018 and 2019, you have the ability to live test 50% of the age eligible animals standing in your pens. So if you released all your deer or sold them, a lot of people sell all their does and they shoot their bucks. If you've released, sold, or harvested or released to harvest all your age eligible animals and you have a very young herd standing in your pens and your pens are still a TC2, once those animals become 16 months and older, you can walk in and live test 50% of them via rectal biopsy or tonsil biopsy or a lymph node biopsy. And you can submit those samples to the TVMDL. Once those come back, you would be upgraded to a TC1. That portion does not expire. Okay, the only portion of these rules that expires in the very near future is on May 15th. If you only tested 25% of your animals, live tested 25% of your animals to achieve TC1 status temporarily, you have till May 15th to submit another 25% in order to qualify for TC1 permanently. Okay. The other thing is it's important to note that if you're just uncomfortable with live testing or you don't have a handling facility or you don't care about being a TC1 or a TC2, all breeders and all release sites go back to the same transfer category and the same class as long as you've been compliant with these rules. on on basically March 31 of 2019. Okay, so after the 2018 and 2019 hunting season, all breeders, all qualified breeders, will go back to one level of postmortem testing, and they will all be on the equal playing field, and all release sites will go back to an equal playing field with no release site testing. Okay, so um, again, I have people call me and say, Patrick, I don't want a live test. I don't mind testing the 15 deer out of my pasture each year. Then you don't have to. You can, as long as you are movement qualified and you're abiding by the movement qualification rules, you can continue being a TC2 until these rules expire on March 31 of 2019. So that is always an option for you. Uh, this is a good question. And I think this deals with the DNP. I am a TC1 breeder. Can I rent a buck from another TC1 facility without negatively impacting me or the other breeder? Of course. You can always trade between classes. The other thing is you can sell down the ladder. So if I'm a TC1 or I'm in the Animal Health Commission program, I can sell down. I can sell down to a TC2. I just can't bring a TC2 deer to my TC1 facility or my enrolled facility in the Animal Health Commission program. Okay. Um, so this is another very good question. How often is an age-eligible animal able to be tested? Every 24 months, you can take a valid sample off of an animal. Okay, so every 2 years, you can take a valid sample. Now, if you got an insufficient sample, you can sample that animal again immediately. Okay, but for the purposes of sampling the same animal twice, you can do that every 24 months. And again, I want to go back to, if you're knocking deer down, my advice is to always have a vet there to pull the sample, because those samples are good for 6 months. So if you happen to need testing and you're knocking deer down now, you might as well go ahead and pull the rectal sample, because that rectal sample is good for 6 months as long as it's not submitted for validation. So that's a very clear nuance I need to make with you. If you hold it in a jar, it's good for 6 months. If you turn it into the lab, it just counts as a test because the lab automatically uploads it to Parks and Wildlife System. Okay. Um, okay. So there's another question that says, I have heard there is a new postmortem test that yields quicker results. What is it, and is it good? Um, the new postmortem sampling is called the ELISA test. And it is a faster, more efficient way for the lab to read results. Okay, so whereas some results are taking more than 30 days to get back, sometimes almost 5 weeks, the ELISA test turnaround is only about 10 days. Sometimes even less than that. People have got them done in less, 7 days. So it is a much faster turnaround for your results. However, I need to caveat that by saying it also has a higher propensity to yield a false positive. So nationwide, that test is more sensitive in that it will yield a live test. It will yield a positive test more than the other normal tests that we all submit. Okay, and so now I want to be very clear. The lab in Texas uses the ELISA test for quite a few samples each year. If there is a positive out of an ELISA test, the sample is sent up to Ames, Iowa, where Ames, Iowa certifies it using the immunohistochemistry test, the IHC test. Okay, the IHC is the gold standard. It's what most breeders are submitting. However, there are folks out there trying to utilize the ELISA test because they want fast results. But please understand that yields a false positive. Um, and also that ELISA test must be a fresh sample. You cannot stick that in formalin. Okay, so do not stick it in formalin if your intention is to use the live test. You can figure out the difference between the two and research the difference between the two on the Texas Animal Health Commission website. And you can also call TVMDL, and they will tell you, they will explain to you how to submit those samples if that is the technology you intend to use. Okay. Let's get back to some questions here. If I have a certified herd, can I rent a buck for DMP breeding and then return him to my pens? The answer to that is I do not believe you can, but I will look into it. I do not believe that you can ever take a certified animal and put it in with any release site animals. Okay. I want to be very clear about that. It is my belief, I can call the Animal Health Commission, that if you are a certified herd, you cannot be in the DMP buck program rent a buck program, because if you mix those with animals that are not certified, and that would be any animals on a release site, then when you return them, you would have tainted your certification status. So I would not advise doing that until you have written authority to do that from your regional veterinarian at the Texas Animal Health Commission. Y'all, let me get through kind of a lengthy question here, and I'll be right back. There's a very interesting question here. Folks, this is the kind of stuff that we're working out in the nuances in these rules. There's two questions here. One deals with missing tests. Let me confront the missing test question first. If you have taken a sample and submitted it to a lab, and for whatever reason it goes missing, the lab loses it, the FedEx truck fails to drop it off, any myriad of things happen to that sample where it was not able to reach testing, but you submitted it, you filled out the accession form, you submitted the tests, etc. Okay, if that happens, you will be granted a grace period of up to, I think Parks and Wildlife right now is discussing 60 days to go in and retest. In some scenarios, I know folks have been offered to have that testing done again at no charge if it was a lab's fault or something other than that. Okay. However, I believe there is going to be a grace period set where there will be a 60-day window that if a sample goes missing, you will be able to retest. Okay. Where that would be important is if you have the May 15th deadline and it goes missing there. Okay. That would be one of the scenarios where it would be very important for you to be able to retest if your samples went missing. However, again, you would have had to have filled out the accession form. You would have had to have a veterinarian probably write a letter for you certifying that on that date you did. You would have had to gone into TWIMS and activate the live testing mechanism there. So if that is you and you have missing tests, you will have the ability to make them up. Okay. We do believe that Parks is having honest conversations with us about providing breeders a mechanism for them to live test. All right. Another question is, if all of the deer were live tested in 2016 and then moved to my pens, would I have the ability to live test them in 2017 and 2018? My gut reaction is no, you would not. You will have to ensure that you meet the 3.6% minimum deaths and 80% eligible mortality standard based on deer that die, because you will not have a live testing mechanism if all of your deer were live tested in late 2016 and then moved to your pens. You wouldn't be eligible to live test those animals again for another 2 years or a year and a half till late 2018. That is a very good question. It's a very ugly nuance in the rule. However, it's situations like that that we can try to work with our permit staff and other agency staff to try to get an answer for that. Okay, so got a question here on the ELISA test. It says, in the event that a false positive happens, what is the impact to the breeder? Well, that's happened. Let me tell you how it happened. That breeder was notified that there was a positive on his facility. He was shut down. He was locked down immediately. And for about 2 weeks, he and all of the people he was trading with were locked down. So they initiated a false positive into the entire lockdown system, where they locked down all of the trace ins, trace outs. They locked in that scenario. They actually locked down secondary trace outs if an animal had passed through to the facility. So in this only scenario that I know of, there was a very clear trace out protocol initiated even without the sample being certified in Ames, Iowa. They initiated the trace out process after the false positive happened at TVMDL. Folks, we didn't talk about Triple T. We are working diligently. We filed legislation on it to allow Triple T out of Class 1 release sites. In my opinion, this is one of those issues that I believe our industry is still being damaged over. Our industry has tested far more than any other state in the country. We've tested more than almost 4 times more than every other state in the country combined. We're yielding positives in a very, 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 very small number in an isolated geographic area of our state, and yet Triple T is still not allowed out of a Class 1 release site unless you stop releasing breeder deer there for 5 years. And you could stop releasing breeder deer there for 5 years, and then you only get the opportunity to apply for a permit. They don't have to give you the permit. So our intention is to return to being able to utilize the Triple T permit. Our belief is that our industry, through live testing and through an increased minimum testing through these rules, we believe we've proven that our deer are of less risk than many other states across the country, and certainly the wild population in Texas. Our deer come from tested facilities when they're in a Class 1 release site. Those release sites in many cases have already been tested, because if you remember, during the emergency rules that happened in 2015, many of those release sites were having to test animals. So our intention and our hope is that we will get Triple T returned to breeders without the 5-year prohibition on the release of breeder deer. We are working alongside legislators to get that done. We will continue to work alongside parks to try to amend the rules at the agency as well. Our hope is that maybe after this transition period, even the agency will take a look at this. But for now, if you are eligible to Triple T, you need to know that 15 deer must be tested from the trap site. And then additionally, you're going to have to RFID tag all your animals upon release at the release site. Okay, so you're going to have to test 15 off the trap site, put in RFIDs, release onto the property, and then those RFID numbers must be reported to Parks and Wildlife. Okay. Got one last question. Does the 80% rule and the 3.6 rule continue indefinitely? Yes, sir. Those provisions in these rules continue into perpetuity until rules get changed again. There is no discussion of having a wholesale look at these rules again. We have just been told that the transition period of these rules will expire in 2018-2019 after that season. So on March 1 of 2019, things like TC1 and TC2 and Class 1 and Class 2 will go away, and the minimum movement qualifications of 80% post-mortem testing in your pens with a minimum number of samples collected of 3.6% of your age-eligible animals standing in your pens on the last day of inventory will continue past 2019. All right, folks, we've kind of reached all the questions. Oh, now we have a few popping in. Um, we've got some questions about issues that aren't related to the rules, and I would rather not take those. If you would like to see a webinar on other issues that don't deal with this, please write me. Let's talk about it. I'd be happy to host weekly webinars or bi-weekly webinars on issues that are important to the industry. So we're going to have some land and management webinars coming shortly in the next few weeks. We're going to have biologists and others on the line to field your questions and take questions and answer questions, especially as fawning season happens. We're going to have some webinars on fawning and some seminars on that as well. So I'd rather not get into those questions on this one. Let's take those questions other places. We do have one other question, and that is, if I have achieved the 80%, does the 3.6 apply to me still? Yes. So let's say in the scenario where you owed 4 tests, okay, and only 3 deer died and you tested all 3. That means you would have 100% testing, but you would not have met the 3.6% minimum, okay? So you're not gonna make it, okay? If I have and I'll give you a real easy scenario. So if I have 100 deer standing in my pens, and I have 3 deer die this year. So I have 100 deer on March 31 at 11:59 p.m. All right, so my number is 100 for my inventory number. I've had 3 deaths, so that makes my total number that's useful to calculating the 3.6% rule 103. I tested all 3 of those animals, okay? But that means I would have qualified. However, I should have tested 3.7 deer. So that means I should have tested based on the 3.6% rule 4 animals. I've only tested 3 because I only had 3 die. That means I have to walk into my pens in order to stay movement qualified and live test animals through a rectal or tonsil or lymph node biopsy at a 3-to-1 ratio for that 1 death that I couldn't account for. Okay, so I want to explain that scenario again. On March 31, I have 100 age-eligible animals standing in my pen. I've had 3 deaths throughout the year. I've tested all 3. I log into TWIMS and it shows that I'm 100% for this inventory year. Okay, from April 1 to March 31, I've tested 100% of my eligible mortality. You will be downgraded to non-movement qualified because you did not reach the standard of 3.6% of your age-eligible animals standing in your pens on March 31. That number should have been 3.6, or we round up to 4. So you should have tested 4 animals for postmortem sampling. Since you only had 3 die, you're 1 short. That means you have to call a vet and take 3 live samples to submit them to the lab. And remember what I said earlier. If that's you, I would take 4 or 5 samples just so you don't have to call the vet out twice, okay? All right. Oh, now we got a barrage of other questions here. Are there any efforts being taken at labs to speed up the test? Absolutely. I do want to tell you folks, these labs, especially TVMDL, has worked with us consistently to ensure that we are able to process tests, to be able to ensure that they are able to process tests as fast as possible. And they have also reached out to other labs for help. Folks, I got to tell you, we've submitted more than 30,000 tests in recent years. I think that's more and I don't want to speak out of turn or speak for the labs, but I think that's more than the labs were set up to handle. And so when you're testing that many animals in such a condensed time frame, it puts a lot of stress on those labs. Those labs have reached out and they are working diligently with other labs to try to get that time frame down. I believe throughout the summer you'll see that time frame condense for getting your results back pretty significantly. Um, let me get some more questions. Let me read some of these questions here. I have a few long ones. Okay, so this is a really interesting question. When the rules change after the 2018-2019 hunting season, will we be able to live test 3-to-1 ratio to make up for the one missing postmortem test? The answer is yes. That provision still stays. So that is definitely one. What is the deadline for application renewal? That is a very good question, and I'm sorry I don't know it. My gut tells me it is May 1, but I need to check on that. I will email that out to everybody. I will email that out to everybody as soon as I know it for when the deadline for application renewal is. I have an interesting question on Class 3 release sites. I don't want to air this information out over a live webinar because it's a lot of specifics. If you don't mind, the person who has a non-movement qualified Class 3 release site and is experiencing insufficient samplings, please call me on my cell phone. You can find it or you can call me here at the office. It's on our website at texasdeerassociation.com. When it comes to trace in and trace out scenarios, I want to be very candid with everyone. Those are always handled differently from case to case. Epidemiologists and veterinarians come in and write those plans, and so I don't want to give information out here that would be oversharing on your part or any other thing. So another question is, in the Texas Animal Health Commission program, do the 12-month and older count towards your 3.6%? Yes. In the Animal Health Commission program, if you're enrolled, even if you're year one, if you're enrolled in the program, your eligible age of testing is 12 months and older. Now, what it doesn't count for is the live testing. You can only live test a deer that is 16 months and older. But if you're enrolled in the Animal Health Commission program for inventory and eligible mortality purposes only, your number is 12 months and older. Okay? So live testing, you can only live test deer that are 16 months and older. Folks, we've gone about an hour. I'm going to give time just if there's any last minute questions here. I'd be happy to answer them. I'm going to take about 2 minutes more and see if any questions roll in. If they do, I'll answer them. If not, I will conclude and let everybody off. I want to tell you, we've had more than 100 people attend. This has just been really good to have all the questions coming in. I hope you found it worthwhile. We have recorded the entire session and we will post it online for folks to review. Those handouts will also be included online. So you'll be able to see the entire rules document, a summary that the Texas Deer Association put out, and then a summary that Parks and Wildlife also put out. You can see all of those online. And so we want to be sure that you are able to have access to the information. Again, I don't want our regional officers or board of directors to kill me, but if you have questions in the next 4 days, I'd ask that you reach out to me on my cell phone. My cell phone is 512-217-0456, or you can get me at the office at 512-499-0466. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Text is always a lot better for me than calling, but if you can't get me and you need something answered in an emergency, reach out to our board of directors or our regional officers. Those guys have spent a lot of time committed to dealing with these issues. they're certainly more than welcome. They're more than happy to help you. And the ladies and gentlemen on our board and on our regions have spent a lot of time dealing with these rules, and they'll probably be able to get you an answer pretty quick if you can't get a hold of me and need something very fast. Again, folks, right now is the time to be pulling your inventory on TWIMS. Right now is the time to be going over your numbers. You may be very close. You may be thinking about kicking bred does or selling bred does. And that might reduce some of your inventory numbers to help you qualify in some of these scenarios. So rather than waiting in April to sell deer, you might want to get those animals out or kick them out to your pasture right now instead of waiting. All right. Let me. I do have one other question on a release site, and then we'll conclude. It says, what happens to the status of a Class 1 release site if they kill no deer but fail to complete the harvest log? When is the last date to complete a harvest log on an annual basis? To be clear, if you don't kill anything, you don't owe anything for a harvest log, except you just have to turn in, your blank sheet that has all your biographical information on it. But if you've killed deer and you've failed to complete a harvest log, or there's errors or omissions on your harvest log, you're going to need to reach out to Texas Parks and Wildlife, because in some scenarios they've asked for animals to be harvested to ensure that you're meeting up with those standards. You may have to wait until the next hunting season to harvest those animals, and so you may be waiting in your release site to qualify until the next hunting season. So, but again, if you killed no deer, then you won't owe a harvest log except for just your biographical information, because you won't have any animals to test in your harvest log. All right, y'all, I thank you very much for the. Oh, now I just have two more. Sorry. Is TVMDL uploading postmortem testing results directly to TWIMS? Yes, they are. So also, deer tested prior to the accession form, April 2016. Will I be able to upload those results as in prior years? The answer is yes. So both of those. So if you have deer that you've had that are older than the accession form, you will be able to submit those results. And also, if you are using the accession form and you're sending them into TVMDL, they should be automatically uploaded into TWIMS. Now, I want to tell everybody one thing: the deer breeder permit staff at Texas Parks and Wildlife works very hard day in, day out with our industry to be responsive to folks and to monitor TWIMS at the appropriate level. However, y'all, they're human too. Sometimes people just make mistakes. Sometimes samples go where they are uploaded into the system, but the system hasn't quite upgraded you to TC1. We've had it where sometimes it just failed to automatically upgrade. It takes a little review process. So work with your deer breeder permit staff. Those folks over there have answers to your questions, and they also can, if you're seeing that you submitted the samples and the samples are back to you and you're looking at the results, but your facility still isn't upgraded to movement qualified or to TC1, call them. It may just be a situation where they haven't had the opportunity to update the system yet. Okay, so don't get discouraged if that's the case. Regarding the question about can results be submitted if they were prior to the accession form, the answer is yes. Any old results can still be submitted. Okay, I know there is a practice to save those tests. You can definitely save tests till the end of the year and turn them in and submit them. That is not a problem. All right. If your release site is a Category 1, you are not required to complete a harvest log. That's another good a good point. If you are a Class 1 release site, you're not required to submit a harvest log. That would be the other thing. So if you're a Class 1 release site, no harvest log and no release site testing. All right. Anything else? If there's not anything else, we've gone an hour and 10 minutes. I can't tell you thank you enough. Look for more of these. We're going to have them in the very, very near future on fawning. We're going to have them on food plots, on ranch management, a few other issues. We're going to be traveling around the state to get with the state's leading biologists and deer management and experts on deer management techniques. And we're going to have a few more of these on topics that you would like. If there are topics that you would like to see, please feel free to email me. My email is patrick@texasdeerassociation.com. If there's anything else I can answer, I'll be happy to do it right now. I don't see any questions in the queue. So with that, y'all, we're going to sign off. I really appreciate it. We will post this on our website so that folks can review the audio. Again, it will also include all of the handouts so you can look for yourselves, read for yourselves in the rules if you have any questions. All right. Thank you again, and I hope y'all have a great week. Have a blessed day.